And I've been having
Hello,
issues.
hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Aaron McCracken. I This is Roberta's House Real Talk. I am a homicide survivor advocate working at Roberta's House for about a year and a half. I am joined by three esteemed colleagues. I will let them go around and introduce themselves. First, we'll start off with Mr. Greg. Can you introduce yourself and tell the people how you were connected to Roberta's House?
Yes, first of all, I'd like to say good evening to everyone. Appreciate really being on this talk show right now. My name is Gregory Prelo. I am retired law enforcement. I worked as a law enforcement officer for almost 30 years with the Maryland Transportation Authority Police. And due to a tragic incident of one of my coworkers being killed in the line of duty, I ended up at Roberta's house as a volunteer, being asked by his sister, Kelly Tucker, who's now a volunteer coordinator, and I've been volunteering since the year 2009 for Roberta's house.
Thank you for that. And Mr. Roman, can you introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely. Good evening, everybody. I'm happy to be here. I'm one of the facilitators for the Change the Game group for young people who are dealing with grief at Roberta's House, Baltimore, Maryland. And I'm very happy to be a part of the Roberta's House family.
Thank you. And Mr. Alexander, can you introduce yourself and tell about some of the upcoming events and things going on at Roberta's House?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Alexander Sattery Robinson. I am the Development and Capital Campaign Director with Roberta's House. And we're very excited about a couple of things that are happening. One, our 5th annual crab feast had to be postponed because of us all, having to stay at home, but we have reimagined it, and on August 8th, we'll have the Grab Crabs and Go event. It's going to be held at our office, in the parking lot of our offices at 2510 St. Paul Street. You'll be able to order a dozen crabs, a half bushel of crabs, or a full bushel of crabs. If you go to our website at www.robertashouse.org and click on events, you will see the listing for the events, the crab feast, and we would welcome you to attend. As many of you may know, we are under construction for a brand new Roberta's House Grief Support Center, which will be located in the 900 block of East North Avenue. We're very excited about the new building, the new center. It's going to allow us to expand the services that we provide. And we're also offering to individuals who want to support our capital campaign the opportunity to buy a brick. These bricks will be placed right outside the front door as you enter. It's an opportunity to honor a loved one, commemorate a special occasion or event. And again, if you visit our website, you'll see under our donation page the opportunity for you to buy a brick, and it's especially engraved with whatever message you would like to send, or the individuals you like to remember.
Thank you for that, Mr. Alexander. And I want to take the time out to, me and Mr. Alexander started working at the same time. I want to take the time out to let you know, your hard work has been acknowledged at Roberta's House, and really appreciate all that extra, lengths you go to help us out. Next, can we, no problem. Next, Mr. Adam, can you introduce yourself, and can you talk about how the people can join the group? I want to apologize ahead of time. As you can hear, my daughter's in the background. So I just want to let everybody know COVID has affected us all. And one is I'm a stay-at-home dad and a homicide survivor advocate at the same time. So Mr. Adam, can you talk about how people can join any group through Roberta's house and introduce yourself to everyone.
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Adam Johnson. I'm the Family Services Manager here at Roberta's house. So upcoming next month, we're trying to recruit for a men's group, a men's support group, because we want to help out the men in Baltimore City and the surrounding areas to, one, learn how to cope with their grief, but also to vent their grief and process their grief in a healthy way. So if you were interested in that group or any of our services that we have at Roberta's house, such as our homicide group that Aaron had mentioned, or our Families Healing Together, which I'm a part of, or maybe our Hope group, which deals with infant and prenatal loss, you can give us a call at 410-235-6633. And that's, once again, that's 410-235-6633. And they will direct you to me and we can have a conversation about which support group will be beneficial to you and your family.
Thank you for that. So part of the pre-show, we're going to keep it light and just do some general discussion. I know yesterday we went over a topic, but something came up today in a meeting I had, and I want to get your take on it. So we know that the funds for the Baltimore City Police Department are being, well, they're trying to be slashed by 22 million. Where do you think would be the most beneficial place for the funds to be allocated to? If do you think that defunding the police in the first place is a good idea? Try to limit your answers to about 2 minutes. I'll give you a heads up, and if anybody has any rebuttals, we can go ahead. But I just want to know, with the 22 million that are being taken from the police department's budget, where do you feel is the best place for those funds to go? And Mr. Roman, we'll start with you. What do you think would be the best place for these funds to go at?
Well, first of all, I do agree with us attacking the funds that are being poured into the police department, because we're getting a very poor return on our money. With the money that's being poured into that particular branch and the trauma that they are inflicting on the area that they are employed, it's just simply unimaginable. I'm not one who feels that we don't need the police. I appreciate the police. Every time I have dialed 911, they have arrived. And so I appreciate that. However, there is no doubt in my mind, because I am a victim of police brutality. I've experienced the hardship that we are protesting. So when we begin to talk about the funds, I feel that one of the most appropriate places for the funds to go is toward the youth of the city. Now, when we talk about that, some people immediately begin to talk about the school system. And that's not what I'm looking at. I think that the school system has its own identity and it serves the young people in its own unique way. And we have a very effective superintendent here in the city of Baltimore, who I believe with time, she will do a good job. She inherited a mess. So when we talk about bringing it to the youth, I'm talking about sustaining activities in the summer and in after school projects that don't just come for a 3-year grant. Activities that go on continuously, where kids can say, were you a part of that when you grew up? And we can talk to another generation that was a part of it, that consistently teach our young people the life skills that are needed to make a better decision. We need the wraparound services in the urban community. Now, some people will talk about the fact that our numbers are not as big as Anne Arundel County and other counties, and that's the truth. But the conditions of the county compared to the city are extremely different. There are some things that require more money. So the youth is where I would suggest that it would be funneled to.
Thanks for sharing that. I will say that I've had more good run-ins with police than bad. I will agree, but I will also agree that there is an issue systemically in the police departments nationwide and I'll say worldwide. I mean, this isn't just a United States thing. So to segue to that, Mr. Greg, with you being an ex-police officer, I would like to know your take on the department being defunded and with those funds, where do you feel they should go, or do you think the police department should keep those funds? So I want to get your take on that.
Mr. Greg, you're muted.
This seems to be one of my favorite things to do. I have to start off a show, talking while I'm muted, but but nevertheless, I feel like when you start talking about defunding a police department, it has to be something that's carefully thought out, carefully planned, and I think that a lot of the funds should not actually go out of the police or outside the agency, but I think it should be allocated for other departments within the agency in many ways. For instance, I believe that training, whatever is done in training, can always use funds to enhance the training for its officers. I've seen sometimes where vehicles, for instance, need to be upgraded or need to be replaced in many cases, I should say. And this is not something that you can just go out and make a quick decision on where these funds go. Now, as Mr. Roman said, I totally agree with working with our youth in the community. I was born and raised in Baltimore. I always had a recreation center that I could go to. I grew up in East Baltimore. I had a center probably 3 blocks away from me. That was at School 85, Fort Worthington, where I actually attended elementary school. As well, you had Bochex, which is over on Edison Highway off of Monument Street and off of Madison. And there was always a place to go. Now, if you go past, they have rebuilt Fort Worthington School, but when you look at the recreation centers, many of them look like Bochex right now. They're boarded up. There's nothing at all going on. I mean, we did everything from just had fun laughing with one another, to ping pong, to pool, to shooting pool, to whatever. We played basketball. A lot of the kids right now in the communities don't have that. So I am good with reallocating funds, but I just think that it should be carefully thought out before you start talking about the police department, where they're already underfunded, and maybe there should be closer contact to see how the money's being used. I know there were some issues in the past about overtime, the way overtime was being used. That's been an important thing where those funds could actually be used, and overtime is fine as long as something's being done during that overtime, as long as you're doing something to help the city. So again, I'm not too big on just defunding and going in it with your feelings. And now, although you need to hear views from all sides, it needs to be a carefully thought out plan. And as long as that's done, I think we can do it.
It's interesting you said it, Mr. Greg, because I'm one of many that feel as though there's no reason for the last 2 summers that our children had to go to school with air conditioners that didn't work. And in the wintertime, heating systems didn't work. So I do agree that, facilities do need to be, upgraded. And I do understand that police department themselves do need the latest and more upgrades in order to deal with the situations in the city. Mr. Alexander, how do you feel about this question? Do you feel as though the police do need more upgraded technology and vehicles and other resources, or do you feel as though that money could be spent elsewhere to try to quell the ills of the city?
Well, I think that there are some immediate things that could be done. I believe that that police departments across this country are fundamentally flawed. They were designed to do exactly what they do, to police people in a militarized fashion. It has been more and more. The Baltimore Police Department budget outstrips what we spend on health services, on housing, on a number of other issues. So one of the first things I think that we would do is reallocate funds, and as San Francisco is doing, immediately move to a circumstance where, if it's not a criminal matter that needs to be pursued, then we don't send in armed individuals to address it. So allocating more resources to mental health services and substance abuse services that are the cause of a lot of disturbances and domestic situations. Having the responses come from not armed individuals, but individuals who are in communities. Let's transform the notion of community policing to actually have community watch programs where the individuals who are monitoring what's going on in the community have the mechanisms and the tools to communicate. If a circumstance escalates to the point that we need to bring in someone with guns. But I think that you can't expect anything but violence if the way in which you're trying to address an issue is with lethal weapons. So I think that the role of the police needs to be narrowed, and certainly I don't think that they need any more funds. They need to spend the funds that they have available to them wisely, and some of those funds need to be reallocated to areas that actually have evidence that they make a difference. We don't have any evidence that policing makes a difference in making our communities safe.
Okay, we run out of time. So I'll ask Mr. Adam. Mr. Adam, a slight change in the question. Mr. Alexander says that we need to use that money for mental health. What if the police department were to use some of that money in order to create positions with social workers where they were able to go on some of these calls in order to de-escalate and to aid the police so that there's no police involvement at all? Do you think that would be a better way of the police department spending their money, or do you think it should go somewhere else?
I think that one of the things is that they do need to invest more in mental health. I think a lot of times officers go into these calls and aren't equipped with the healthy tools to de-escalate situations, whereas as a clinician, a social worker has education and experience to go with that they can go into a situation more equipped to de-escalate an individual instead of the person becoming violent or belligerent and things like that. That social worker, that clinician can get that person to a place where they can calmly talk, calmly find ways to help them in that situation instead of it escalating and going to force and an arrest and things like that. The person doesn't need to go to prison or go to jail that night. They need some substance abuse support, mental health support at that moment, or maybe even housing, shelter, things like that. And I think having a social worker there to address those needs and who can question them in the appropriate way to question and to get those answers, I think will be way more helpful in the long run than just locking somebody or sending them to jail. And that's just going to make their situation that much worse.
Okay, I would ask everybody to mute their phones if they're not speaking, please, so we can limit the background noise. You know, what just crossed my mind when you said that, I would, all of us on this panel are men of a certain age. What if the city were able to create a resource book, as they did the yellow pages, not the yellow pages and white pages used to get passed out everybody's doorstep? What if people that need the resources don't know how to get to them? What if the city were able to distribute? I know online everything is there, but now everybody has access to the internet, as we've seen through the pandemic with students trying to get online to learn. So I'll take it back to Mr. Alexander. What do you think that would be, and we can close this out, we have about 2 more minutes till we get started. Do you think that if people knew about the resources that were available, they would be able to access them?
Yes, I mean, I certainly think that more public education about the resources that are available, just having more options available to individuals. One of the things that, you know, I've noticed recently, you know, we talk about how many people have food insecurity. One of the things that the pandemic has created is that there's lots of people providing meals, fresh food, fresh vegetables, full meals. Why hasn't this been happening before? I mean, we've had hungry people in Baltimore, you know, for some time. We shouldn't have to have a crisis to address those needs. And so I think that we've had community canvassers in my neighborhood that have come through saying that if you know of anybody who needs meals. So likewise, I think we should have community canvassers saying, you know of anybody who's in need of mental health services, or who's in need of substance abuse treatment, or who is in need of certain things, that having a much more aggressive campaign to make sure that the challenges that we know exist, that the resources that we have available to address them, that a broad swath of the community knows about them.
Yeah, you know, it's funny you say that. Some people will say the same thing about the protests. Why does it take police brutality for us to want to fight the system? You know, why can't we be more proactive instead of reactive? That's very interesting. So I'm going to close out the introduction, warm-up, pregame, however you want to put it, of this. And I want to reintroduce my panel as we get started on what we're here for, which is to start this discussion on male grief, male trauma, so we can try to get rid of some of the misnomers, some of the bad perceptions of mental health that men, especially African-American men, have towards it. I have a great panel here, very experienced panel. There are 3 veterans and 2 rookies, I would say that, on the panel. So we'll start with one of the other rookies on the panel. Mr. Adam, could you please tell everyone what you do again at Roberta's house, how long you've been here, and how has your view of grief changed since you started working with us?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Adam Johnson. I'm the Family Services Manager here at Roberta's house. I've currently been employed at Roberta's house for the past 4 months. So like Aaron said, I'm definitely a rookie, still trying to get my feet wet.
No, that's not why you're a rookie.
So one of the things is, like Aaron has said, that being here at Roberta's house for this short period of time has changed my outlook on grief, because growing up, you never really hear about it, especially within the African-American community, and being the males, that you always have to be tough and strong dealing with anything. And so when there were relatives or friends, loved ones who passed away, the men were usually the ones who just tried to keep everybody else together, comfort everybody else, be strong for everyone else. So working here at Roberta's house and participating in some of the groups that I'm seeing is that there's definitely a great purpose for men to share their grief, to share it in words, to share it with others. Because like one thing that I know being in the mental health field is that it's easy to press down all your feelings and emotions, but it takes true strength to see them face to face and to address them in a healthy manner. That takes true strength, true courage to address those emotions. So that's something that's definitely changed my view of grief since working here at Roberta's house.
Now, thank you for that, Mr. Adam. And what I want to say is the reason why I call me and Mr. Adam rookies is because it's not me making fun of the other three gentlemen. It's because they are veterans, and there's a big disconnect generationally in the African American community between the older and the younger. And I want to pay homage to three veterans who have not forgotten the rookies, who have not forgotten that we still need guidance. Although we are older, you can never stop learning. I've talked to some gentlemen, some young men who feel as though we forgot about them and we've disowned them due to a lot of various systemic injustices that were placed on the African American community. So I want to start with Mr. Alexander. A great deal of knowledge comes with him, and I want to start with you. Well, continue with you. Can you introduce yourself? Tell what you do at Roberta's house, how long you've been here, and how has your view of grief changed since you've joined Roberta's house?
Well, thank you for your compliments. Yes, again, my name is Alexander Sattery Robinson. I am the Development and Capital Campaign Director for Roberta's House. That means I'm the money guy. I'm the person who helps make sure that we have the resources that we need in order to do the important work. I think that for me, the thing that Roberta's House has, the way in which my own personal grief and grieving has been impacted is just the being around other people who are willing to openly talk about their grief, openly talk about their experience, individuals who understand and know the grief process and what can come out, can come out of that, both the positive and the negative. And so I come from, as others have expressed, a background where, expressing grief, particularly publicly, was just not something that you would do. There's a whole range of emotions that you didn't express publicly. And it certainly has been transformative for me to come to a place where I understood that, my grieving could be a sign of my strength, my willingness to embrace the loss of an individual that was close to me, or a loss of a sense of security, is not a weakness, but a strength, because I can build on that. Once I understand what those emotions are about, I can allow myself to experience it and build on it.
Thank you for that. And again, I appreciate you, and just to throw it out there, you helping me out with my resume for school. You didn't have to do that, and that's just one of the things that I appreciate. From you, being an elder, you looked out for a rookie, and I really appreciate that. We'll move it to Mr. Gregg. Mr. Gregg, can you tell us, same thing, what brought you here to Roberta's house? How long have you been connected to us? And just introduce yourself and your background.
I'm Gregory Prelo. I was a member of a law enforcement agency for nearly 30 years with the state agency, the Maryland Transportation Authority Police. I have been a part of Roberta's House since the year 2009. I came in as a volunteer, as requested by Kelly Tucker, who's our volunteer coordinator.
Kelly Brooks.
Kelly Brooks. Sorry, Kelly, but I worked with her brother, Courtney, and we called him Spanky, but he was killed in the line of duty in 2008 on New Year's Eve. I responded to shock trauma, and it's actually where I met all of his family, including Kelly. And I stayed with them probably until 4:30 a.m. On the 1st of 2009. So within a year after that, I was contacted by Kelly. She had become the volunteer coordinator at Roberta's House, and she asked if I would assist with the Camp Aaron, which is a camp for children 6 to 17 years old. It's a grief camp, and they learn a lot about themselves, about their feelings they're going through. They learn that it's okay to cry, that it's okay to be angry, but it's just how you channel all of those feelings that you're going through. So I've been working with the camp ever since 2009. You can pretty much find me at Roberta's House doing anything that I'm asked. It's very hard for me to say no, because I know that whatever we're doing within the Roberta's House family, that we're helping somebody. I did briefly work as a survivor advocate the first year when we initiated that particular program, where I had to connect with families who were victims of homicides within Baltimore City. So I've done that, and what I've found is that a lot of the men, and I'll think about one particular time where I talked to a particular gentleman who had lost his brother, and he kept telling me, Mr. Prelo, I have to do this. I have to take care of this. I have to set up the service. I have to take care of my mom. I have to take care of my sister. And I watched him for a long time. And then finally I said to him, tell me this, who's taking care of you? And he was like, oh, Mr. Prelo, I'm okay. I'm okay, And I said, are you okay? I said, it's all right if you're having feelings that you want to share with me. And he never shared the feelings, but I went to the service. And for his brother, and he got up and he started speaking about his brother. And he not only did he speak about that, but he started talking about himself.
Wow.
And at that point in time is when he was actually answering my question that I had asked him earlier. So I help out in many ways at Roberta's House.
Gotcha. You forgot to mention you're our official cameraman.
Well, yes, anything that I can do at Roberta's House. You need me to move a table, take photos at all the events. I try to make sure I'm there for that. And then I, of course, provide Roberta's House with those photographs. And I meet some great people. And we're on here and we laugh every now and then. And I think that's a big part of dealing with grief as well.
Appreciate it. And last but not least, Mr. Roman, you're very instrumental with the youth at Roberta's House. Can you please let us know how you got connected to Roberta's House, and how has your vision of grief changed? And I know you didn't want to stick this out there, but I'm interested because you are a pastor. Did it change at all, being as though from what you teach? Did your vision of grief change at all? Has it been enlightened at all since you've been with Roberta's House?
Yes. I work with Change the Game, the young people at Roberta's House. I've been there for about 2 years now. I am a pastor. I've also worked as a principal for Baltimore City Public Schools with the core transition high school number 866. It no longer exists. It's been demolished. But I want you to know, by coming to Roberta's house, having the mental health background gave me a head start in the way that we roll out mental health in the African American community from the pulpit. But after being a part of Roberta's house and seeing that there's so much more, and that grief unaddressed is the cause of so many other explosive behaviors that our young people are suffering from, when if they simply had the opportunity to work through their grief, they probably would have made so many more and better choices. So one of the things that I do is verbally destroy the myth that our community does not receive mental health services. We speak about it often, and we back it up with scriptures where the Bible says, in the counsel of many, there's wisdom. So go get some counseling, you know, where, and you don't enter anything ill-advisedly. And so by doing that, we kind of trim the huge rumor that you shouldn't receive mental health services because there's something wrong with you if you do. And I want you to know that it's not an easy thing to do. Now,
Appreciate it.
yeah.
Thank you for that, gentlemen. So we're getting ready to get started with our Q&A part. Before we do that, speaking of changing the game, I want to address Mr. Renzer. Mr. Renzer is a part of Roberta's house, and she had a loss. I want you to know that Roberta's house, the family, the staff, you know, we all are thinking about you and your family at this time. We love you, and we hope things work out for you all, okay?
Absolutely.
So I'll start with Mr. Adam. Got a question for you, okay?
Yes.
How have you been spending your time during the COVID? Oh, you know what? I didn't introduce myself. I apologize. I'm McCracken. I'm your moderator for this evening. I'm a homicide survivor advocate. Been here for a year and a half, and my view on grief has changed because I've been able to process myself while working at Roberta's house. So my grief, I've learned that it takes time. And that was my biggest thing. I didn't realize how much time. And I didn't realize you can be grieving years afterwards. I just thought it was just anger, but it's not, it's grief. It's just masked as anger. So that's been my biggest takeaway with grief. Sorry about that, Mr. Adam. So yes, how has your time been spent during this pandemic? Have you been social distancing? Are you tiptoeing outside to check to see if you can, you know, if you want to do anything? You know, what have you been up to?
Mostly, like you said, social distancing. Pretty much, only time I leave the house is to go to the market. Pretty much. But one of the things about being in quarantine is starting a new job. So I only had a week and a half at the actual Roberta's house office. So it was just kind of like, yeah, learn how to do your job away from the office. So most of my time is just trying to be like learning from other staff, participating in groups, observing groups, just as trying to reading up on grief, to just to kind of equip myself for the people that I talk to on the phone on a daily basis who are dealing with grief and are looking for supports. So most of my days are just on phone calls with individuals who are looking for support, grief support, and usually I'm the first voice that they hear. So I want to make sure that I'm compassionate, empathetic with them, also knowledgeable on those phone calls. So usually I'm just constantly just trying to find ways just to be as effective as I can for individuals to want to come into Roberta's house and receive some support for their grief for themselves and their families.
Gotcha. My time has been spent working and watching my daughter at the same time. Me and her mother are terrified to send her to daycare. So she's been with me, and it's been an adventure every day. There's something new. So for all you fathers out there who are multitasking with your little ones, I feel your pain, and good luck to you with that. Mr. Alexander, how have in the past, well, in the past and now, when you've lost a loved one, has your coping changed? How have you dealt with coping due to the loss of a loved one?
Well, as we talk about all the time, a loss of someone who is close to you, really depends, and the way you deal with that on, what the relationship was. So, I, I've lost, my grandparents, my parents. I've had, I lived through the worst days of the HIV/AIDS epidemic. I have a photograph of a meeting that I attended where there's 20 of us in the photograph and only 2 of us are alive today.
Wow.
So, my experience and that, with the first losses, there was a tremendous amount of grief and crying and sadness. And then there was a period of numbness where, the losses just continued to pile up. I couldn't bear sort of that level, sustain that level of grief and continue to move on. So I had to learn other ways of remembering those individuals, other ways of coping, other ways of sharing that experience, and understanding that there are moments when I'm just sad, and that it can be triggered by a movie or a television program or something that somebody said, and understanding that sadness is grief, that it's not necessarily about that moment, that movie scene wasn't that poignant. It's just that it brought up those feelings again. And I've learned to sit with that and be okay with it. And that's definitely something that has changed about the way in which I was taught to deal with with grief, and the way that I thought that a man was supposed to deal with grief.
And one thing I will tell you, Aaron, as Mr. Alexander talked about it, when we lived through that time frame when the government ignored the AIDS epidemic, and we saw what was happening with this current administration when they downplayed the coronavirus. For some people who lost many loved ones during the AIDS epidemic, in your mind, you start thinking, here we go again. It's happening again. They're ignoring us. And it kind of made that anger part of grief become a little more real. But then again, because we've learned to work with our grief a little bit more, you bring yourself down and you're able to center yourself.
Mr. Alexander, it's interesting when you said that you were trying to grieve as a man. I didn't have a father growing up. So to me, I didn't know where to go when I was upset. So I lashed out. And I think it's important that we as a community realize that we have to find someone to talk to. A lot of time gets lost with bitterness and pettiness. And with the African American community and our health issues that we are born with through DNA, the last thing we need is to be dealing with stress that's untreated. So I agree with you on that one, Mr. Alexander. Mr. Roman, I'll come to you next. How do you feel about being open and honest with a stranger? I'm sure that being a pastor, you've come across many faces that you haven't known before. So what are some ways that you deal with as a funny story, I've been in Virginia at a Walmart, and somebody said hello to me, and the Baltimorean in me walked right past them and said nothing to them. And I took several steps before I realized somebody spoke to me. And it's that culture shock, because up here in Baltimore, we don't speak to nobody. You know, we head down, do what you do. So how do you, as a Baltimorean, but as a pastor, deal with opening up to someone you're just meeting?
Well, I tell you, it's one of those acts of bravery, and I feel that it's going to be difficult for you to wrong me if you know me. You're not going to rob me. You're not going to do that if you know me. And I'm from Chicago, Illinois, and
Okay.
when I went away to school, I'm from the west side of Chicago, and I went to school in Indiana. And as I was walking from class to class, Adam, people were saying, hello, hi, and I,
Exactly.
what is going? It's a setup. But what I've learned, and it's very important, I started when we do the chin up, as we do chin up to each other every now and then. If I see you a second time, I'm gonna stop and we're gonna dap, and I'm gonna tell you my name, and I'm gonna try to get your name. I don't know if I'm gonna see that person again, but as we start sharing each other's names, it humanizes us. It makes it possible for us to share. And I will tell you, for the past 25 years that I've been in Baltimore, I'm starting to reap the benefit of openly talking. And I've sat right at the bus stop with people and allowed them to begin the process of working on their grief as they talk to me. And I used to think, well, we need to be in an office, we need to go somewhere, but you'll be surprised how beneficial it is to yourself when you hear someone else work out their grief in your presence.
Right, right. It's like a door opened.
Yeah.
And it's powerful when they have spent so much time to themselves because they felt like nobody knew. And yet you broke their door open and they were able to share with you because they let their guard down and are able to be comfortable in a conversation. That's really
right. Letting that guard down, you really learn.
And I don't think people understand that when you're the person that's being told everything, that can be powerful as much as releasing it, because
Yes,
somebody's allowing you into them spiritually, and you know, it allows you to be with them on a whole other level. So,
I'll tell you, one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had was talking to a police officer who was experiencing grief because literally they had no one to turn to. You know, in the African American community, there's so many bad words spoken about the police. So sometimes they can't even speak to their family because their family have this false thought about policemen. And when I actually allowed a police officer to talk with me through, and they started sharing how they came into the force together, and how they went through their training, and how many times they shared as they talked and worked and all that. And I thought, oh my God, this is a major loss. And they had no one to share it with. And I was privileged to be a part of that conversation.
So to segue, Mr. Greg, I'm going to apologize. I have to ask this. You said that what brought you to Roberta's house was Miss Kelly and the loss of her brother, who you knew. When you lose someone like that on the force that you work with, how did you cope? How do you cope? Did you cope the wrong way back then, and you think now you may know more about grief and you would do it differently? How do you deal with that, Mr. Gregory?
Well, first of all, I learned about something about grief on a daily basis because all of us grieve in different ways. You know, I never go to someone and say, "Oh yeah, I know how you feel," because we never know how the next person feels. But I tell you, with me, it started a long time ago, Aaron, because when I was 6 years old, my 2-year-old little sister died. And it just caught everybody by storm. I mean, we didn't know what was going on at the time. Certainly, I didn't know what was going on. I was thinking to myself, kids that age don't die, but I was in the house when my mom found her unresponsive. And since then, I continuously asked my parents questions, even at 6 years old. There were a lot of things going on. She was buried in South Carolina. She didn't have a headstone. There weren't a whole lot of children in that funeral, in that cemetery. So even back then, I said, you know what? One day my little sister's going to have a headstone just like everybody else here. And it was only a few years ago that, and talking to my parents and talking to my siblings, that, I was the one that went and looked into purchasing a headstone for my sister. And we had a little graveyard service for her with my child, my nieces, my nephews, my mom and my dad. The night before that, I had gone and purchased a tarp that we placed over it, and we had an unveiling of it on the day of our reunion. I went to the cemetery, and my family is mostly from South Carolina. So you mentioned it earlier. I talk to everybody. I say hello to everybody. But I went to the graveyard at 9 o'clock at night and put that tarp over it and over the gravestone, and put little decorations around it. And by then I knew that all those questions, wanting her to have a stone, little things that I did, and being a public servant, being on a critical incident stress management team. So I had to talk to law enforcement officers who had been in attached to major incidents to make sure they were okay to go back to work. I was able to teach police suicide intervention. I believe that all of these things were a part of my grieving and how I handle my own grieving. And that is by helping other people as much as I can, because I know how I felt when I experienced loss, and all I want to do is try to do anything I can for anybody who's grieving. So that's where it comes in with me. Okay. Yes. So you have a law enforcement officer that gets killed in the line of duty. He's your friend. He's like a brother to you. The first thing I did was, I didn't even know who that officer was initially until I went to the hospital. And that's where I met all of his family. Now I'm just trying to be there for them. There's not a whole lot you can say at that point in time, because but you just want to be there. And I didn't realize it until I got in my car and I started, because it was on New Year's Eve, and I had Happy New Year wishes coming to me. The first one was from my daughter. I get emotional when I think about it, but she said, "Happy New Year, Daddy," and I lost it because somebody's dad didn't go home.
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
And you did one of the smartest things. Sometimes in grief, when somebody's going through it and we're with them, we want to say something, not knowing that our words can sometimes make it worse. So sometimes we have to be humble enough to accept, I don't know what to say. So
yes, sir.
So Mr. Greg, think that was I commend you for that. Some people want to be the person that I said the perfect thing to get them out of this. And
Yeah.
it's not always going to be there.
But I did offer them prayer and they accepted it.
And at that moment, that's what they needed. You know, they didn't need the pat on the back. They didn't need the days be better. They needed that prayer, and you gave them what their family needed.
Mhm.
And so at Roberta's house, we try to implement that we're going to meet the client where they are. So we're not going to push anything. You know, we're going to find them the right words to get them by. We're not going to, you know, if the person isn't spiritual, then quoting scriptures isn't going to work for them. You know what I mean? So finding that middle ground to where they can feel as though their feelings aren't falling on deaf ears is really important.
Yes, and Roberta's house had brought a lot of things to light that were going on with me. I knew what I was doing. I knew, you know, my reactions to things, but Roberta's house has brought some things to light as to why those things were going on, what they meant, what they mean, and that's what that education on grief has brought.
Mr. Adam, can you read that question from Facebook for us?
Sure. So the question is, as a female, how can I help my husband to deal with his grief? Oftentimes, men don't want to talk to a female about their pain.
Okay, so I want to say my 2 cents. Mr. Adam, I'll let you answer that. You're married, correct?
Yeah, sure. I can. Yeah.
Okay, so my thing is, you can't, male or female, you can't force them to answer. You can't force them to come out and tell you what's wrong. You have to give them their space and opportunity to get those feelings and emotions together. Some people don't know how to verbalize what they're going through. So don't put a time limit on when they should be able to talk to you. Some people aren't ever ready to talk. So that's my 2 cents of it. You have to allow that person, male or female, brother or sister, husband, wife, give them that time to come to you when they're ready. So Mr. Adam, how do you feel about that?
I definitely agree with that. And I think one of the things that women can do with men, especially dealing with something as tough as grief, is keep that door open. And so just kind of be like, hey, I know you're going through this right now. Just know that I'm here when you're ready to talk. And just doing those constant reminders will let that man know that, okay, I have this outlet. I have this support system in place. And I think one of the things is sometimes we can just, sometimes I think a woman can kind of broach the conversation by even talking about their experience with grief and being vulnerable in that moment. I think can definitely elicit emotion out of the man and getting them to feel more vulnerable and start to talk about their experience. But I think keeping that door of communication open, like, hey, that I'm here to talk about this specific thing, I think is so helpful, because it's kind of like, I'm not ready yet, but I may be ready tomorrow, but I may be ready next week. And so when you just keep giving that little droplet, I think it helps in the long run, because it's kind of like, okay, I had this support system, let me reach out for it. Instead of just like badgering over the head and just be like, why are you not talking about this, and the third? That would make a man go into a shell. But just kind of like just having your arms open, just like, hey, I'm here whenever you're ready. I think that is just an approach for a man, just to kind of like, okay, I'm ready. I have the strength now. I have the courage now. I'm brave now enough to talk to you about this problem.
I would also add, informal conversations can be really important. So if the person who asked the question, so if you and your husband share tasks, if you cook together, if you garden together, if there are things, particularly things that are physical, that you're being engaged, that might be a good time to, again, just say, the door is open to have a conversation. Sometimes, that we're sitting here now, let's talk about it, can be stressful. It can put you in a position of wanting to retreat. But if you're already engaged in some other activity, sharing some other experience, a conversation in that context can often allow the individual who is grieving to open up more, to not feel the same amount of pressure to respond. So I would say, just as others said, be there, be sure that you're saying that you're open for the conversation, but also look for openings in your daily life and activities where it would be natural just to have an exchange that isn't some form of we're now going to talk about this loss or your grief over this specific issue.
I would.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Aaron. I would add to that, get the information to them. Brochures where they can get help, get that information in the house. You don't want to push it down their throat, but make it available. But one thing that I wouldn't say years ago, but it happened and it worked for a couple that I worked with. The young lady invited her man to watch Antoine Fisher, the movie, and it literally propelled him into the conversation, which brought about the working of grief.
Aaron, real quickly, it might even be a good opportunity. I applaud the lady for sending in her question, but it might be a good opportunity to let her know a little bit about the men's grief group we're starting at Roberta's house.
Yeah, we'll do that when we sort of wrap up, Mr. Gregory. I will say this, that some advice that I give my survivors, my clients, is when you're dealing with grief, sometimes the best thing to do is to get out the house, get out your head.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a great point made earlier. That Mr. Alexander made. Get out the house, do something fun and engaging. When you sit around the house, you become, you fester in your own thoughts, and that doesn't always. That's sometimes a recipe for disaster, especially when we're trying to get over grief. So sometimes getting out, doing your activities. It's crazy, Mr. Alexander. Everything you said, I tell my clients to do. Go on YouTube, I do it all the time, find a new recipe, go get the ingredients and start cooking. If you work out, go for that run or go for that walk. Just do something you wanted to try. Do a paint night. Just sometimes getting your person out of their normalcy will sometimes steer them away and get them out of what I call that hole that they're trying to get out of themselves. They're looking up, trying to get out of it because they know they're inside of it, but they don't know how to. So sometimes doing other activities allows them to get out of there.
Hey, Aaron, we have another Facebook question.
Okay.
And this question says, how do males deal with their grief differently than females?
I could write a book on that. Well, there are a lot of, Mr. Greg, I'll let you get this one, but I will say that first thing, some things that we get quiet, we don't talk, and we lash out, and which is the unhealthy part. We get into that shell, and because it's our safe haven, because we've been told for so long, men don't cry. We've been told for so long, that you're supposed to suppress your feelings or have no feelings. So when we grieve, we realize we're vulnerable now. And I know we're vulnerable, we can be penetrated, we can be hurt. But we can't be hurt, not emotionally. So I would say that's to me, that's what I used to do. And I'm a work in progress. I'm still taking that chisel to that whole persona of what a man should be. So that's what I would say is, the first thing is men shut down. And then if you sometimes it's kind of like on a highway when you're driving and there's a truck in front of you with the rocks on it, and the smallest pebble will crack the entire windshield. And that's what happens when grief hits us. That small little crack, the small little pebble can sometimes push us over the edge and make it shatter. And it's hard to put the pieces back together. But Mr. Greg, what are some thoughts you have on that?
Well, I tell you, Aaron, you really did a fantastic job in explaining it. So I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I will say that a lot of pressures are placed upon men by society, by their families. We put a whole lot of pressure on ourselves to be Mr. Strength for everybody. And I can tell you, coming from a law enforcement point of view and talking about the police suicide intervention, why was there a high suicide rate amongst police officers? Because number one, we're individuals who, you know, when everyone else is running away from trouble, we're running towards trouble.
Yes.
Okay, so we're looked at we're looked upon as heroes, basically, or as the strength. And so we feel like things like crying, you know, shedding a tear, where we're showing a weakness. Okay, and we don't want to look weak to anybody, but it's far from being weak when you shed a tear. And you know, so men are more apt to clam up, not want to say anything, and trust me, some men might not show it to you, but they cry. They might not want to do it in front of people, whereas women, you know, women are open to sharing their feelings. If they cry and they feel that way emotionally, they're going to cry. So I think that's a big difference. But I think you really did a great job in explaining that.
Appreciate
We all have those same feelings.
Before we get out of here, Mr. Adam, do you want to go over before that, Mr. Alexander, can you go over the bricks and the crab feast real quick? And then Mr. Adam, can you follow up really fast with how anybody can join our group in our upcoming mail group?
Sure. So on August 8th, we're going to be having a fundraising event, which we're calling our Grab Crabs and Go. So for the past 4 years, one of our most popular fundraising events has been our crab feast. So in this time of social and physical distancing, you'll be able to, if you go visit our website and click on events, you'll be able to see the opportunity for you to get a dozen, a half bushel or a bushel of crabs. So and come by and get your ticket, and that's a way to support Roberta's House, and you can take your crabs home and share them with your family. So that's August 8th, and the information is on our website. It probably in November of this year, we hope, our new center will be opening in the 900 block of East North Avenue. We have an opportunity for you to show your love for Roberta's House and for individuals who you value in your life, loved ones, commemorate special occasions with a brick. And the brick will be, can be inscribed with a personal message from you of a memory or just acknowledging your support for Roberta's House. Again, if you go onto our website and you look at our, click on Give, you'll see the opportunity for you to purchase a brick. The deadline for the bricks is June 30th, so you'll need to go soon and get your brick and be a part of making history.
Thank you for that. And Mr. Adam?
Yes. So one of the main purposes of us doing this real talk with the men of Roberta's House is that we're preparing to start a men's group, a men's support group dealing with grief. And one of the main things about this group is that we want to break the stigma that goes along with men being vulnerable, men sharing their feelings, and men sharing their emotions. Like Aaron said earlier, a lot of times as men, we bottle up our feelings, we bottle up our grief, and the slightest thing and we just go off, we go to the left, and things come out the way they shouldn't come out, and we react to things the way we shouldn't react. So what we want to do with this group is to teach men and to show men, giving them a safe place to share their grief, process their grief, but learn a healthy coping mechanism. So like the question we had earlier, so they can have healthy conversations with their wives or significant others. So they can have healthy conversations with their children, their parents, grandparents, whomever they come in contact with. So we're still receiving applications and referrals for this group. You can definitely call Roberta's house at 410-235-6633 to learn more about the group and to learn how you can participate. Also, you can call me directly at 443-436-2513. We want to start this group up very soon, but we just want to be a resource for brothers all across Baltimore City, even in 21217. That's that Sandtown, Winchester zip code. So we know we got a lot of brothers out there that definitely could use our support. We just want to be support to the brothers in the city and the surrounding areas. So once again, you can reach out at Roberta's house at 410-235-6633. Also, you can reach out to me directly at 443-436-2513.
On behalf of the panel, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. I want to let you know that Roberta's house is here to serve the Baltimore community, male or female. If he has issues, trauma, grief related, please give us a call. We would like to help you. We want to be there for you, and we're here, okay? Thanks, everybody. Please join us next week. We'll be back next week. Once again, the same gentlemen, the same rookies, the same vets will be here to answer your questions and to discuss. Hope to see you then. Have a good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.